The spring of 1945 was filled with collapse, silence, and uncertainty. In the ruins of a crumbling empire, one man unexpectedly became the last leader of the Third Reich. His name was Karl Dönitz, a naval officer who had dedicated his life to the sea, discipline, and duty. Unlike those who sought power through ideology, Dönitz emerged from the world of warships and submarines. Yet in the final days of the Second World War, he found himself at the helm of a state that no longer existed. How did this sailor, once known only among naval circles, become the last head of a doomed regime? If you enjoy such stories from history, make sure to like this video and subscribe. Many more fascinating narratives are on the way. Karl Dönitz was born on September 16, 1891, in Grunau, a suburb of Berlin. The son of an engineer, he chose the naval path early, entering the Imperial German Navy as a cadet in 1910. His education was shaped by the traditions of discipline, precision, and an unwavering commitment to service. During the First World War, Dönitz began his career on light cruisers, but soon transferred to submarines, a relatively new and dangerous branch of naval warfare. In 1916, he became a U-boat commander, leading missions in the Mediterranean. In October 1918, just weeks before the war ended, his boat was sunk near Malta, and he was captured by the British. He spent the final months of the conflict in captivity, reflecting on tactics, leadership, and the possibilities of future naval warfare. The interwar years were marked by restrictions. Under the Treaty of Versailles, Germany was forbidden to build submarines. Yet within the Reichsmarine, officers like Dönitz continued to study submarine tactics quietly. For him, the submarine was not just a weapon, but a strategic instrument capable of striking at an enemy's supply lines, crippling even the strongest navy by cutting off its lifelines. By the late 1930s, as Germany rearmed, Dönitz was placed in command of the newly formed U-boat force. His ideas became central. He believed in coordinated wolf pack tactics, in which groups of submarines attacked convoys at night. This method, while risky, proved devastating in the early years of the Second World War. Dönitz's name began to appear beyond military circles. He was seen as a master of submarine strategy. Yet, for all his growing influence, he remained a naval officer at heart, far from the inner political struggles of the regime. When the Second World War began in September 1939, Germany faced the immense challenge of confronting the Royal Navy. Dönitz, by then commander of submarines, had only a small fleet at his disposal. He believed that at least 300 operational U-boats were necessary to blockade Britain effectively. At the outbreak of war, he had fewer than 60. Nevertheless, early successes seemed to prove his theories. In 1940 and 1941, U-boats operating in wolf packs sank thousands of tons of Allied shipping. The Atlantic became a battlefield of endurance, where merchant convoys were escorted by destroyers while shadowed by submarines. For the Allies, the protection of supply lines from America was vital. For Dönitz, disrupting them was the key to victory. The turning point came in 1943. Improved Allied radar, air patrols from long-range aircraft, and the breaking of German codes through the Enigma machine gradually eroded U-boat effectiveness. Losses increased sharply, and Dönitz faced the painful reality that the Battle of the Atlantic was being lost. Yet, despite this, his personal career advanced. In 1943, he was appointed Commander-in-Chief of the Navy, succeeding Erich Raeder. His rise was not only due to his professional ability, but also to the trust placed in him by the country's leadership. By this stage, Dönitz was one of the few senior commanders not deeply entangled in political disputes, making him appear as a man of loyalty and discipline. As the war situation worsened for Germany, his focus shifted from offensive operations to the desperate defense of remaining ports and the evacuation of civilians and soldiers from advancing Soviet forces in the east. This humanitarian aspect of his command would later become a central theme in how he was remembered. The death of Adolf Hitler on April 30th, 1945, created a power vacuum. In his political testament, Hitler named Karl Dönitz as his successor, not as Führer, but as President of the Reich and Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces. For many observers, this was a surprising choice. Dönitz was not a political figure. He was a career naval officer, respected but relatively unknown to the general public. When Dönitz learned of his appointment, he was in Flensburg, near the Danish border. There, in the small naval town, he formed what became known as the Flensburg government. It was a fragile administration, presiding over a state that was collapsing from all sides. His primary goal was clear: to end the war in the West as quickly as possible, while buying time to evacuate as many civilians and soldiers as possible from the East. On May 4, 1945, at Lüneburg Heath, German forces in northern Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands surrendered to Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery. 4 days later, on May 8th, Germany signed the unconditional surrender to the Allies, marking the official end of the war in Europe. Dönitz had been head of state for only a matter of days. His government, though technically recognized for a brief period, held no real power after the surrender. On May 23rd, Allied forces arrested Dönitz and the remaining members of the Flensburg cabinet. The chapter of Germany's last wartime government closed almost as soon as it had begun. After his arrest, Dönitz was brought before the International Military Tribunal in Nuremberg. His trial focused on his role as Commander-in-Chief of the Navy and as head of state during the final days. The prosecution accused him of waging unrestricted submarine warfare in violation of international law, as well as of continuing the fight even when defeat was certain. In his defense, Dönitz argued that unrestricted submarine warfare had been employed by other nations as well, including the United States. Testimony from Admiral Chester W. Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, supported this point, emphasizing that submarine tactics in the Pacific were similar. Nevertheless, the tribunal found Dönitz guilty on counts of war crimes and crimes against peace, though he was acquitted of direct involvement in planning aggressive war. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. From 1946 to 1956, Dönitz served his sentence in Spandau Prison in Berlin, alongside other high-ranking figures of the regime. His time in prison was marked by routine and reflection. He spent his days reading, writing, and corresponding with his family. For a man who had once commanded fleets and briefly ruled a nation, the isolation of Spandau was a stark contrast, a reminder of the fleeting nature of power. Released in 1956, Dönitz returned to his family in Amula, near Hamburg. Unlike many former officials, he lived quietly, away from the political spotlight. Yet he remained a figure of curiosity and controversy. In 1958, he published his memoirs, 10 Years and 20 Days, a reference to his decade of imprisonment and his brief time as head of state. The book offered insights into naval operations, leadership, and his perspective on the war, though critics debated its interpretations. In the decades that followed, Dönitz rarely appeared in public, devoting himself to writing and correspondence with former naval comrades. He passed away on December 24, 1980, at the age of 89. His funeral, attended by both veterans and historians, symbolized the end of an era, the last living link to the final days of the Reich's leadership. Today, Dönitz remains a complex figure in history, neither a central architect of the regime nor a detached bystander. He embodied the contradictions of loyalty, duty, and the burdens of command. His career, from submarines to head of state, reflects how individuals can be swept into positions they never sought, with consequences that echo far beyond their intentions. The story of Karl Dönitz is not only about a naval officer who rose to unexpected prominence, but also about the strange turns of history. In the ruins of a defeated nation, he became a leader for a few fleeting days, not through ambition, but through circumstance. His life reminds us how quickly the tides of power can shift and how responsibility can fall on unexpected shoulders. Remembering figures like Dönitz is less about judgment than about understanding the fragility of history and the lessons it holds. If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss the next journey into the past.